Good evening, everyone. I'm Zen Master Sebastian Rizzon, founder of the Zen Art Center and the Mind Lightway School of Zen. And I give these Dharma talks on the third Thursday of every month. And you can find them anytime on the Zen Art Center YouTube channel if you ever want to check out the older ones or anything you missed in this talk. What is the mind? We all know we have a mind, right? But how many of you can tell me what your mind is? In last month's Dharma talk, I made a metaphor that your mind is like a mirror because your mind reflects whatever comes in front of it. However, if you cling to certain views and ideas, it's like taking a photograph and becoming attached to that picture. The photograph might represent what something was, but it's not what reality is. The same thing happens when we cling to the mental constructs that we've created in our mind to help us understand reality. When we cling to our conceptual thoughts about reality, it's like clinging to pictures of reality. These representations can be helpful, but they're not a completely accurate reflection. If we get too attached to our thoughts, opinions, and desires, it's like being attached to certain views of reality, and it can obscure the way we see things. When your view of reality is obscured by your thoughts, it can make it difficult to respond to situations appropriately. This can lead to all sorts of problems. If you become attached to your thoughts, it means you're detached from reality. Detached means separated. It implies that your mind is not in the moment. When I say don't be attached to your thoughts, it doesn't mean to be detached from reality. It means to completely immerse yourself in the reality of each moment. Not being attached means don't cling to anything that passes in front of the mirror. And don't cling to your opinions about what happens. It doesn't mean being indifferent either. It means that when something comes in front of the mirror, you see the situation for what it is. As the situation changes, you don't hold on to the past. You just stay continuously engaged with what is in the mirror. Zen practice teaches you to stay focused on what is in the mirror. This means paying attention and staying fully engaged with what is in front of the mirror in every moment. Then you can respond appropriately to every situation. This means that your mind is reflecting the truth 100% in every moment. This is the purpose of Zen practice, and it's what the word Zen actually means. Zen is an English word derived from the Chinese word Chan, which is the shortened version of the word Chana, which was a Chinese transliteration of the Sanskrit word Dhyāna, or the Pali word Jhana. Zen Dhyāna is a state in which awareness remains unbroken, continuously engaged with what is present in the consciousness. It doesn't necessarily require an external object, a thought, or an action, but instead refers to the sustained flow of attention without distraction. Theoretically, anyone can reach this state at any time. However, most people are so attached to their thinking that they can't achieve this state easily. True dhyāna arises naturally without effort. But most people are so conditioned to think about the world conceptually that they can't engage directly with what is present in every moment. People constantly let their mind wander and cling to their thoughts and ideas about the world. So how can you let go of your thinking and desire to try to conceptualize and characterize everything you experience in the world? This is your koan for today. How can you let go? How can you focus your mind so that your experience is not being contaminated by your thoughts? A koan is a Zen technique that challenges you to transcend contemplation and thinking. It requires that you abandon all rational and logical reasoning in order to understand and experience what the koan is pointing to. Zen requires direct engagement with what is present in consciousness. True Zen requires complete and effortless focus in each moment. However, for most people, this is extremely difficult because their thoughts are constantly wandering off into the past or to the future or to think about another place, their job, or their family and friends. For most people, thoughts and ideas are constantly filling their mind. This is why learning how to focus on each moment usually requires some initial effort and practice. One way you can practice focusing your mind on the moment is through sitting meditation. Sitting meditation can help you learn to clear your mind of wandering thoughts, which helps you stay focused in each moment. In the next part of class, we'll practice sitting meditation together. But first, we'll start off with a breathing technique that can help you prepare yourself for meditation. I want you to start by breathing a little bit slower and a little bit deeper than you usually do. Visualize your heart in the center of your chest as you breathe. As you listen to me, I want you to keep slowing down your breath and breathe a little bit deeper. Feel your breath coming in through your nose and mouth, collecting all of the energy from your brain and moving it from your head into your heart. Imagine now that you're breathing with your heart. The purpose is to try to align our mind, heart, and body. You can also place your hand on your heart and close your eyes if you'd like. Keep breathing a little bit slower and deeper as I talk. This is a technique that you can use to relax or reset yourself whenever you feel nervous or anxious, or whenever you feel like you need to switch gears from different activities you're doing throughout the day. You can use it when you wake up, before you enter a stressful meeting, before you go to sleep, or before you meditate. Let's just take a few more moments and take some slow and deep breaths. Next, we're going to move into a mantra meditation. When you're sitting in meditation, you can cross your legs, or if you're sitting in a seat, just try to keep your back straight. Try to keep your neck straight so you're not slouching. We'll close our eyes, and if they were open, they'd be at a 45-degree gazing at the floor, but we'll have our eyes closed. You can put your hands, right hand, left hand, touching your thumbs, centered in your lap. When we do the meditation, we'll turn around, but I'll just go over a few instructions before we do that. So we're going to do a mantra meditation. The word mantra literally translates to mean a tool for reflection. In Zen meditation, we use the mantra as a tool for reflecting the mind. The mantra is the focal point of meditation, usually a word or a phrase that's repeated within your mind. We use the mantra to help us clear our mind so we can reflect and experience a mind that's free from wandering thoughts. If you try not to think, thoughts will inevitably come into your mind. By focusing on the mantra, you can use it to push out all of the other thoughts. When you meditate on a mantra, try to let go of your feelings, opinions, and desire. As you meditate, only concentrate on your mantra. If any thought comes into your mind, just let it pass and return to focusing on your mantra. You can use anything as a mantra during meditation. But if you don't have a mantra you want to use, I usually suggest using the mantra of Kwanseum Bosal. Kwanseum Bosal is the name of the bodhisattva of love and compassion in Korean Zen. A bodhisattva is an enlightened teacher that's dedicated their life to helping others. Kwanseum Bosal is often depicted with thousands of eyes and hands, and is said to be able to see the suffering of everyone and help those who call out her name. Using this mantra will bring compassionate energy into your mind while you meditate. Drawing this compassionate energy into your mind will help you relax and clear your mind while you meditate. Once again, the mantra is Kwanseum Bosal. Kwanseum Bosal. And you can just repeat that in your mind as we meditate. So with that said, we're just all going to turn around in our spots, face the other direction, and we're going to meditate for about 20 minutes or so. So in my past few Dharma talks, I've talked about how it's very hard to define what makes something physical. All of physical reality is composed of energy. And energy is just waves and excitations of some other medium. Waves of energy are like waves in the ocean. They appear out of the ocean, they rise and fall, and eventually they dissipate back into the ocean. They're impermanent. Everything we think of as physical is actually just waves and patterns of excitations of energy. Thinking that physical things are permanent things is like thinking a wave is permanent. If you think physical things can tell you the full story about our reality, it's the same as thinking that taking pictures of the waves on the surface of the ocean tells you everything about the ocean. Sure, it tells you certain things about the surface behavior that's true for certain periods, but it doesn't tell you much about the vast depths of the ocean. If you cling to these surface level ideas, you'll never understand the truth about nature. Someone asked me recently about karma and reincarnation. And I think this metaphor about the ocean could be helpful to understanding both of these ideas. If your mind is attached to your body and your sense of self, then you become attached to the karma of your body. If you're attached to your karma, it's like being attached to the waves on the surface of the ocean. When you're stuck on the surface of the ocean, you're constantly being pushed around by the different waves and excitations of the water. The surface energy is constantly pushing and pulling you. Clinging to the idea of physical reality is like clinging to the waves on the surface of the ocean that are constantly changing. If you're holding on to a wave, what are you actually holding on to? Our mind can hold everything in the universe and everything in nature. However, the mind can't really hold anything physical because everything physical is just waves and excitations of energy. The true nature of our mind is also not physical. It's empty. However, it's not empty like physical space. This room is an empty physical space. But if you had enough things to put in it, eventually you could fill it. Your mind is different because no matter how many things you put in your mind, it's still empty and it can never be filled. It's fundamentally not physical, so no matter what you put into your mind, it never changes. It never changes its volume, it never changes its mass. It's always empty. The contents of your mind can change, but the mind itself never changes. It's always empty. The emptiness of your mind is like a vacuum that creates the potential for all of the forces in our universe. This vacuum of potential energy is the creative energy that pulls all things into existence. This pull is what creates the waves and excitations of energy that become the things that we perceive as reality. The waves and excitations of energy are the same forms of energy that make your body and hold it together. However, this is still just a surface level understanding, because we all understand that below the surface of every living being, there's a mind. But as your body grows and moves around, it begins to create its own energy and momentum. This is what creates your karma. This is what we call karma. Everything physical, including your body, is really just a pattern of energy that we perceive in our mind. Try to imagine that everything we perceive as physical is a pattern of swirling energy, like a whirlpool in the ocean. As your mind begins to recognize patterns in these swirls of energy, it begins to differentiate between these things as separate entities. In order to gain an understanding of its universe, the mind creates mental constructs to differentiate between these patterns. It then creates conceptual boundaries and a mental framework of associations to categorize these different swirls of energy. As the mind develops this type of conceptual thinking, it begins to identify parts of itself within these swirls of energy. If the mind becomes too attached to identifying with these parts of itself, it develops the delusion that these swirls of energy that form the parts of itself are the entirety of itself. As self-aware humans, we create labels for all of these things we associate with ourselves. We use words to label our world, our body, and the parts of our body. In English, we made the word head to describe this part of our body. And we made the word hand to describe this part of our body. In truth, there's no separation. It's all our body. We just separate the different parts with these mental constructs. We also created the mental framework of association to say that our head and hand are part of our body. Most of the time, we feel like our mind is in our head because we're focused on perceiving things through our eyes, our ears, our smell, and our taste. But if you pinch your finger, it feels like your mind is in your hand. You can also stare into the night sky, gazing at the stars, and feel like your mind is traveling across the universe. In truth, the mind is in all of these places, not just in certain parts. Perhaps we should also consider that the entire universe is part of our celestial body as well. All of our confusion arises from the perceptions of our body. All of these patterns and bodies of swirling energy in the universe are what grab your attention and consume your mind and keep it attached to the things that we perceive on the surface. The energy pattern that makes your body is what you perceive as the origin of your perceptions. So it becomes what you identify as yourself. In truth, your perceptions require energy going both ways. All energy requires both a source and a destination to be perceived. Your body is essentially like a whirlpool of energy that's constantly sucking in energy, and it's simultaneously sending out ripples of energy away from it into the universe. The swirling energy of your body creates what we perceive to be your life. When we're alive, We perceive the energy of the universe through our bodies. All of our senses are receptors of energy. When we're alive, we perceive life to be a cycle, a complete circle. It starts with birth and it ends with death. But that's only basically a two-dimensional surface view of a deeper, multi-dimensional reality. I frequently ask people this koan: where do you come from before you were born? And where do you go after you die? Most people don't have an answer, but most of them don't think that they magically appear and disappear. Their intuition tells them they came from somewhere, and that after they die, they'll go somewhere. Most religions have some sort of version of this story as well. Science has its own version of this story too. Things in nature do not just magically appear and disappear. The law of conservation of energy in physics tells us that energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. Theoretically, this law applies to everything in nature. And you can also see this principle at work in our lives. During our lives, we create all types of energy and momentum with our bodies that affects our environment. Sometimes you can even see evidence of how the energy of someone's life creates momentum that lasts for a long time after the person's gone. I could name a handful of books that created momentum for decades or even centuries after the author passed away. The ideas carried the energy of the person, and they lived on in their own form. In truth, when we die, only our body is gone. But the energy that we create during our lives just changes form and continues. This is exactly what the law of conservation of energy tells us happens. After we die, the energy and momentum that we create within our whirlpools of our life is still there, even though we can no longer perceive it or measure it in a tangible way. The energy just transforms and continues on. Eventually, this energy takes on a form that we as humans can perceive again, as a life form. We typically refer to this transformation of energy as birth. Although many cultures around the world, including Buddhism, call this reincarnation, because it's just a transfer of that same life energy. If you view these events as a process that happens on the surface level, you can see a series of cause and effects that lead to the creation of a body. But we still have no account for where the mind or consciousness comes from during that process. This is because we only have a superficial view and a surface level understanding of how things work. To understand the truth of how things work, you have to be able to see below the surface. In order to get a different perspective, you have to learn to release yourself from the energy of the waves that keep your mind stuck on the surface. You have to allow your mind to sink into the depths below so that it can understand what is beneath the waves. So how can you do this? If you think of every being as a whirlpool in the ocean, what's at the center of this whirlpool? Every whirlpool spirals down to a point at its center, which leads into the depths of the water. Every being has that same point at the center of their being. To understand where that point is, you have to remain completely focused and centered on that point until you completely understand it, 100%. In Zen, we call that point the mind. The mind is the center of our being. In Zen, we constantly challenge ourselves to answer this koan: what is the mind? That question is the seed at the center of our being, and we focus the light of our mind on that seed until we can see it blossom. The key is to learn how to focus your mind and be completely centered in every moment until it becomes effortless. This is the meaning of Zen or Dhyāna. When you allow your mind to flow to its center, it goes below the surface, below the waves and whirlpools. When you're completely centered in a state of Dhyāna, you get a different perspective and recognize that all of these waves and whirlpools are merely different formations and mental constructs of the same mind. It's one thing to intellectually understand or believe what I'm telling you, but that's not really the point of Zen. Whatever you think about what I'm saying is not actually important at all. You have to prove or disprove everything you believe until you know for sure, 100%. The point of Zen is for you to prove this for yourself. This means you have to experience it for yourself. And the only way to experience this is to be completely focused and centered in every moment. The way you do this is by learning and understanding how to focus your mind in every moment. When I teach Zen, I try to make people aware that there are a number of ways to learn how to focus your mind. I showed you a sitting meditation technique at the beginning of this class, and you can use that to focus your mind. Another important aspect of Zen is learning to keep your mind completely focused no matter what you're doing, without letting your mind wander off into different thoughts. This means treating everything you do as a mantra. You can do this by completely staying focused on everything that you're doing. That might sound easy, but it's not actually always easy to do. There are always thoughts that can distract you and pull your attention away from the present moment. You can learn to get better at focusing on the present moment by practicing moving meditation. I find that for most people, it's helpful to practice moving meditation with an activity that you enjoy. It could be an art form like drawing, writing, or making music. It could also be a form of physical exercise like yoga, riding a bike, weightlifting, or even going for a walk. For me, I learned how to do this through practicing martial arts. It's even more helpful if the activity you're doing demands your attention. But it really doesn't matter what the activity is, as long as you can stay focused. When you can effortlessly sustain a flow state where your actions flow through you without thinking, that's Dhyāna. That's Zen. For most people, focusing their mind takes practice. To get better at this, I'd recommend setting a small part of your day aside and practicing sitting and moving meditation, even if it's just for 5 minutes for each day. The consistent practice every day is it's the most important part of getting better. If you practice every day, your body will become very familiar with what you're doing, and eventually it will stop resisting your mind. Then your mind can release itself from the grips of energy that are always pulling it back to the surface. You can always expand your practice, but always try to do at least some minimum amount of practice every day. Consistency is the key. If you keep practicing like this, you can reach an effortless state of flow in everything you do, whether it's eating, doing the dishes, cleaning your room, or the work you do at your job. If you keep going and keep your focus centered in every moment like this, you can directly experience the mind at the center of your being. It lies just below the surface of everything we perceive. When you experience this, you can completely, 100% understand the mind. This is what we call getting enlightenment. When you experience the depth of the mind, you'll realize that everything physical, including you and I, are just like whirlpools and waves in the same ocean of the mind. I hope you all can experience this for yourself, and I wish you good luck and good fortune on your journeys. And I'm happy to answer questions about anything I said, or I'm sure it might raise some questions. But if you'd like me to elaborate on anything, I'm happy to. Or anything about the mind, or Zen, or meditation, or life in general. This is my favorite part of class, so feel free to chime in with anything.
What do you think is the best thing to do when you're meditating and thoughts come up?
When you're sitting in meditation, what do you do when thoughts come up? Just try to let them pass. I try not to give them any momentum. You know, just if you're meditating on a mantra, you could just return to the mantra. Try to keep returning to a point of focus so that it doesn't continue to, your thoughts don't continue to snowball and cause your mind to wander off. But I definitely, I know it can feel a little frustrating if you feel like your mind is not still when you're meditating, but try not to get upset with yourself. I mean, it's we call it practice for a reason. You know, it's just practicing, trying to get better. Some days are harder than others. Some days it's really easy. But the consistency is what makes you better at it. Because in Zen, the idea is to try to meditate through everything you're doing in your life and to stay focused on what you're doing. But things always come up. Things trigger your emotions, different responses, and it's difficult to keep your mind focused in those moments. Sometimes you can't help but let your mind wander. But if you're practicing, you get better and better at doing it. So as you start to get pulled out of the moment and like carrying anger with you or something, or sadness, if you've been practicing focusing your mind, then you can get better and better at just bringing it back into the moment and letting go of the things that are not pertinent to the moment. So if someone is carrying anger through the day, it's going to taint all of their interactions throughout the day. But if you're able to just focus, if someone makes you angry, that's understandable, you get angry, but just return to focusing on what's in front of you. Try not to carry that anger into any of your other interactions. I mean, that's the type of thing that causes you to make mistakes, like drop a dish because you can't stop thinking about something, or be mean to someone else who didn't deserve that because you're angry at from some other situation in your life. So the idea is to try to give every moment the attention it deserves. So yeah, just in general, just be compassionate to yourself. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has struggles. Everybody experiences emotions, even if you're enlightened. You still have the same experiences. It's just about how long do you hold on to that, or how focused can you stay in each moment, and then you're always going to have the right mindset and approach for each moment. And that can help you make better decisions and get better results in your life. Even if you might have some questions about, like the philosophical things I'm talking about, just staying focused on each moment, that's really the core of Zen. And all of these other things, like understanding your mind, or what makes something physical, these are all things that will you'll come to realize But the real thing is you don't have to know any of that. You just have to stay focused in every moment. And like I said, what I said about it is not important. Your own experience in each moment is what's going to teach you all of these lessons. Question?
I just have a comment in the chat here on Zoom.
Perfect. I saw something pop up, but I couldn't read it in time.
It says, I've been studying generational cycles. Someone born in 1895 can have an effect on someone born in 1995. And I think this is related to reincarnation and momentum. So it says, generational cycles. So someone born in 1895 can have an effect on someone born in 1995. There's no question. It's just.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure about what exactly is meant by generational cycles. First of all, thanks for the comment. And but I do agree, like, what was the year, 1895? I mean, I think that's around the time of, my history and timelines are bad, but, you know, I think that's like, wasn't that around the time of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln, the 1800s? I don't know, maybe it was earlier than that. But, like, the momentum of those people's lives is still carrying through today. Everything they did, it's affected our society in a way. So I think you can see lots of examples of that where the energy, which we don't have a way of quantifying, like, social energy, but it's a real thing. You can see evidence of it. And that's these ideas that we cherish and carry on, and ideals and things, those are purely mental, and they affect everything we do in reality and everything culturally and in society, you know, to varying degrees, but they do have an effect on the way things play out. So I do think it's important to acknowledge it. Not everything can be measured with a ruler, and that's not the only way to measure an effect. And I think a lot of times we all are aware of this realm of our mind where we operate so much of our day in, but how much do we really understand that? And that's what Zen is really pointing you to, is to try to understand that through direct experience in every moment. Yeah.
Question. So, yeah, I was just thinking, you know, sometimes I notice when I'm feeling strong emotion that it has this effect of like solidifying my ego and causing me to strongly identify with whatever is in opposition to that emotion, and it and it's, I find it interesting that, you know, depending on the emotion, like the ego can take drastically different shapes, but it feels so solid when I'm in it, and sometimes I get stuck in it. And I was just wondering if, you know, what might be some techniques to like get unstuck, or like, you know, because I think after the fact I eventually realized, like, oh, that's not really me. Like, I don't know why I'm so like upset by that situation, you know, because it's based on this like false identity or false self-image. But without that, it's just like, you know, I could like sidestep it, but when I'm in the moment, it's you know, I forget that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those things we experience that you're explaining about your experience are very natural experiences, part of human experience. I think it's things we've evolved as part of you know, our self-preservation and needing to survive. And it takes different forms in a modern society where you're not constantly facing like real survival life issues. it becomes, that energy is directed in different ways, maybe about preserving some image of yourself or some identity of yourself, or some narrative you've created around yourself. And those are all different forms of mental constructs and conceptualizing the things that happen to you. And they are real forces that can affect the course and act of your life, right? And sometimes I find the ones that are really ego-based end up being like some of the more destructive parts of the actions I've taken in my life. But I do think it's part of the self-preservation. So I think it's something everybody has to deal with in their life to varying degrees. And through my experience, I want to say, my teacher would often say, just go meditate, right? But, and I agree with that, but I'll elaborate on that, because when you're upset and angry or sad or, depressed, those are the hardest times to meditate, because it seems like the most counterintuitive thing to do. You can convince yourself that you can think through it, you can think of a solution, and you can solve the problem in some rational and logical fashion. And sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. And sometimes these things are out of your control, and it's counterintuitive to think, oh, I should just sit and calm my mind down and meditate. And what I'll say to maybe inspire you is that these things can give you, meditation can give you a different perspective in something you weren't thinking about that is a good solution. It makes space for those things to pop into your mind. So a lot of inspiration or solutions to big problems come, maybe someone's thinking about a problem and then they finally relax, and then it comes to them. Yep. It's like an epiphany or the eureka moment. I think when the Greek person was sitting in the bathtub and the water raised, and he was like, oh, that's like the relationship between mass and volume and density. So there's a lot of examples of that. So this is just inspiration to encourage you to meditate. But what I'll say as far as techniques, practicing the techniques when you're not feeling like that is the way to build that tool to make it useful in those times when you think it is counterintuitive. You have to learn how to trust your tools. Like, you have to learn this tool works in this situation, and you have to keep your tool sharp and ready to go. And so the practice when things are good is very important, and then practicing consistently even when you're having a bad day, over time that just makes it better and better and better. And it's never like waving a magic wand where your problems go away, but over time you just get much, much better at seeing it happen, saying, I have a tool for this, going to that tool, and then alleviating the suffering that's coming over, the toiling that comes along with thinking. And you can use the sitting meditation techniques I use, but I also really suggest having some form of moving meditation. It could be an exercise. A lot of people get it from like running or riding a bike or doing yoga, something like that. Those are valid meditation techniques. And eventually you can just learn through practice, and this took me years and years and years to figure out how to meditate while I wash my dishes and not let my mind wander, right? But it's possible to do that. It's just the more mundane that you feel the task is, the more routine it is, it's so much easier for your mind to wander. But if you can learn to treat everything you do like that, and then anytime, ultimately you want to get to a point where anytime any of these emotions are coming in, you're washing them away with the dirt of your dishes or vacuuming them away with the dust on the floor. It becomes, you're cleaning the floor and you're clearing your mind at the same time. But that it's possible to just do it, but for me personally, it took a lot of practice to get good at it. And that's why I suggest just trying some kind of activity. And, you know, if you're into yoga or riding bikes or something, like, treat that like a meditation. Try to stay focused on what you're doing, and then think about applying that form of focus to other parts of your life too. And just try and see how much you can expand that to different parts of your life. And I find, for me, having a routine built into my day of some form of sitting meditation, some form of moving meditation, that was really helpful for me to learning how to use these tools and really apply them effectively in the kinds of situations you were talking about. So I know it's not like the simplest answer. In some ways it's very simple, but it's also very difficult to do. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. I think it really does work if you commit to it, and it can really change your perspective on things. And the broader your perspective is, I think you get, the little things don't bother you as much. They still come up, they still frustrate you, but the more expansive your perspective is, and what you view as your world, the less those things, the little things, bother you. And ultimately, what I was trying to point to in my Dharma talk today is that we're all connected. We're all part of this bigger thing. And when you have that perspective, it's really hard to get knocked off course and think like, oh, you know, this happened, it's going to ruin my life. You just have a much broader perspective. And I've had personal experiences where I got knocked off course very far, but having that wider perspective was really like, okay, this is just another step. It's a setback, but I keep going like I've been going, and nothing really changes. I have different challenges, but everything, you know, internally is still the same. Any more questions? You look like you have one.
Tea time.
Yeah. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'm looking to see. Yeah. Clean your room is what someone in the comments said.
It does help.
It does. I think sometimes it has especially when you're improving your surroundings, it really does tend to have some sort of positive feedback loop with your mind as well. I do have a few announcements before we all go. This talk is on the third Thursday of every month, same time, 7 to 8 p.m. I also host a guided meditation where it's more meditation, less talking, different meditation techniques as well. And that's on the first Thursday of every month. So next month, that'll be April 3rd. And then I also host Zen art and writing groups. These are groups where we bring our own art projects, but we're practicing moving meditation on either art or writing projects. And the art can be any form of art. And I also do a little bit of sitting meditation and give a little talk about how you can use meditation as a source of your inspiration, but also then how you can use your art forms as a form of meditation. You don't need any experience to participate in any of these classes. All of this information is on our website, mindlightway.org. And in closing, the Mind Light Way School of Zen is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We try to make all of these classes free and open to the public, but we do rely solely on donations to be able to offer these classes. So if you'd found value here tonight and you'd like to support the school, there's information on how to make a donation. Thank you again for coming, and you're all welcome to hang out and have a cup of barley tea.